Detroit. It's become a bit of a punchline in this country, but you have to ask yourself, how did one of the wealthiest cities in the country become this? Detroit used to be the city with the highest median household income of anywhere in the country, and now it ranks 66th out of 68. It also has some of the highest crime rates, unemployment rate, and lowest graduation rates of anywhere in the USA. In a nutshell, Detroit sucks.
Yes, you heard it. He said Detroit sucks, and we're going to spend the next few minutes proving him wrong. Today, Rose, Amy, and I will be discussing why the negative stereotypes have been placed upon Detroit in the first place. We will also attempt to find out what continues to convince the general public that these views are still validated. Though many studies and much analysis, some worldwide stereotypes include that Detroit is dirty, is a thug-run city, and that it's dangerous. This is so common that, in fact, according to the author Zachary Klima, Detroit has fallen victim to many stereotypes most cities across the U.S., which puts the residents of this city at a social disadvantage. Now the question is, what do we need to change?
Even though Forbes chose to name Detroit as the most miserable American city to live in, we happen to not agree with them. For far too long, the city of Detroit has been depicted as a city of destitution, crime, and unemployment, with no real hope of ever being capable of revitalization. Yet when you drive through downtown and begin to notice all of the companies that are taking over, where former buildings have stood vacant for so long, you will begin to see a slow yet positive change in the right direction. But how can we possibly expect a change to happen within our city if we aren't even willing to believe in it ourselves? As I watched the video that Steven Crowder filmed here in Detroit, I felt many different emotions ranging from anger to sadness. I became angry that during his opening line when he said that he drew the short end of the stick, he had to go to Detroit. Right away that sets a negative tone for the viewing audience. Another thing that I noticed right in the beginning was that the video had a caption title stating, "Crowder Goes Ghetto." Detroit is not the only city in America with areas that are not always the safest or best areas to be in, yet we somehow have been given the worst name. Every area that he went into in the video was either an abandoned building or a vacant house. Yet if he would have panned around the area when he was filming at the old train depot, you would have seen Slow's Barbecue, Mercury Bar, and the Corktown neighborhood, which I happen to live in and is a very safe area to be. He never once filmed in any populated area, which made it look as if the ghetto areas he recorded in are the only areas left in Detroit. Another thing he spoke of was the UAW and the bailout by our government for GM and Chrysler. Even though my father worked for GM and was part of the union, I am not a supporter of them. I think that they cause more problems than they do any good for their businesses, but that's my personal opinion. According to an article from CNN's website, without the bailout from the government, there would have been about 1.5 million jobs lost. It would have not just been GM and Chrysler affected by the bankruptcies, it would have also been their suppliers. And if the suppliers had closed, Ford would have eventually closed as well without having the supplies that they needed. The bailout also helped to keep pension plans intact, instead of turning them over to the government pension agency, where the payments would have been reduced. The bailout was in total around $60 billion, of which around $33 billion has been paid back so far. An estimate stated that if the bailout hadn't happened, it would have cost our government $50 to $60 billion alone in the first year, with unemployment, food stamps, and lost taxes, and that money would have not been repaid. True, the auto industry did play a large part in the downfall of Detroit. But let's go to Amy and see exactly what factors that she believes contributed to this so-called city in ruins.
Thank you, Rose. Behind me is the great city of Detroit. And in Chowder's video, he goes into what he thinks is wrong about Detroit. The unions, the education, but he never goes into why Detroit is the city in ruins. Detroit has a history, and he never really goes into that. Detroit is known for the big three, the automotive company, and in Roosevelt's time, actually doing what he wanted the economy to do, which was producing, and not so much of consuming. But until the 1960s, after that, we started to see more of the economy to consume. But Detroit was still really big, the big three. But also in the 1960s, Detroit is infamous for its race riots. In 1967, Detroit had a race riot. It started off on a Sunday and lasted about 5 days. Over 1,000 shots were fired, but only 43 deaths, even though going for 5 days, and 43 is still a lot. There were over 7,000 arrests, but the damages from the looting and the burning of the city came into a monetary value of $40 to $80 million, just gone because of this destruction. This was devastating to Detroit, and it kind of began what we call the White Flight, where a lot of the white people that were living in Detroit left. But the government gave Detroit a lot of money to rebuild itself, and came known for being a civil rights movement and being a non-segregated of a city. And in the 1970s, we actually got our first African American mayor, named Coleman Young. Now, in the 70s, there was a heroin problem throughout America, and in the 1980s, there was a cocaine problem. Now, Coleman is often known for that problem. He did a lot of great things. Being a leftist during an election period, came into office with more right-winged views. But one thing that he did continue to do was take money from the United States government to rebuild Detroit. And he did things such as keeping the Renaissance Center and finishing it, putting in a people mover. And all those were great, but he had a lot of violence in his time. In the 1980s, with that cocaine problem that I mentioned, Detroit was really known for the drug trafficking. A lot of gangs happened in Detroit. And although after Young's mayorship was over, the crime still continued, he never put a stop to it. So although Detroit rebuilding itself was great, such as the People Mover and the Renaissance Center, not putting a stop to it really makes a non-safe environment to live in. And that is one of the big problems that we have with Detroit, with the crime rate. And that's a little bit of the history of Detroit and why we are in ruins. From the race riots, never really rebuilding, and starting to, but that violence continuing, and that's where we are today with our rebuilding.
During our research, Rose, Amy, and I decided that the city should step up and bring in incentives to convince companies to occupy the abandoned buildings. According to Mala, sensitive, carefully planned reuse strategies have enabled towns and cities throughout the country to find new uses for abandoned buildings and lots, reviving neighborhoods at risk and providing new housing opportunities, parks, and open space. Meaning, if it can work for these other cities, it can also work for Detroit. The city also needs better transportation and parking. Unfortunately, Detroit is no New York and it's no Philly, meaning that when people aren't mobile, they may lose jobs, or that they don't shop and money doesn't regulate throughout the city. We are the motor city, meaning that most of us drive. According to a study at the University of Michigan, limited access to transportation along with lack of safety for pedestrian routes make traveling between neighborhoods difficult. These are some issues that need to be resolved and can make a huge difference throughout the city of Detroit. Revitalization efforts such as workforce development, real estate development, and community and economic development tends to be overlooked by the media, and therefore people still have their same opinions about the city of Detroit. But soon these efforts will be so evident that it will almost be impossible to ignore. While the revitalization is starting in the downtown/midtown areas, it will have no choice but to expand to the inner city. And when that happens, the media will have no choice to ignore that this positive movement in Detroit is happening. So therefore, Detroit does not suck. Detroit has the potential to be a New York, a Chicago, and even in LA, with all of the movie businesses coming to the city. And pretty soon, we will become a great city again.